Today we're delving into the transformative world of carbon credits. Klimat X takes a distinct approach that helps companies directly reduce their emissions using carbon credits. They invest in nature-based solutions to rejuvenate degraded land, capturing carbon and aiding in global climate mitigation. We're thrilled to have Klimat X CEO Dr. James Tansey here today. An industry veteran with a PhD in environmental science, Dr. Tansey spearheaded the monumental Great Bear Rainforest Project. He'll enlighten us on how Klimat X is assisting businesses in achieving their net zero goals through environmental restoration.
So if you're an eco-investor or an ESG investor, the reason I would say you should look at Klimat X is because the neglected part of the climate story is deforestation and degradation. We tend to think about cement plants and aviation and its impacts on climate change, but 20% of global emissions every year come from deforestation and land degradation. So we have to solve that problem. There's no way to stabilize climate change without stopping deforestation. The reason we think Klimat X is a leading company and an innovator in the climate solution space is that we've taken a very different approach to how we develop solutions in terms of carbon credits. So we know there's 4,000 companies globally that have made net zero commitments. They've done that by saying that they'll make their reductions internally where they can from reducing air travel and through energy efficiency measures. But to get to net zero, to eliminate the rest of those emissions, they have to buy carbon credits. And Mark Carney's task force 2 years ago predicted that market would be worth $30 billion by 2030. So what we've done is engage with some of those large corporate buyers and help design and build projects that meet their needs. We're an owner-operator of the project, so we use our equity to de-risk the projects to the stage where we can set up pre-purchase agreements. And in the last 12 months, we've built out projects that will generate almost 50 million tons of emissions reductions and potentially somewhere in the region of $2 billion of revenue over the lifespan of those projects. So what makes us different is the way I designed and built the company was learning from what we knew from mining and other natural resources, the kind of contract structures that work there, thinking about carbon credit development as another commodity that we can develop at scale, developing contract structures that investors are used to seeing and buyers are used to seeing, and using that really to bring carbon credit production up to an industrial scale, which is what we need over the next 10 years to arrest climate change. So we function as an owner-operator of carbon development projects in tropical countries in particular. So we're active in Yucatan in Mexico, Guyana, Suriname, and Sierra Leone in West Africa. We secure the land rights to the projects, we do all the technical development work, and we develop effectively what's a reserve statement in mining, but for carbon credits. That then gets validated by a third party, and in that process of validation, we can start pre-selling those tons to large final emitters, to the large buyers. So we announced in April our first contract, which is an offtake to a Fortune 100 company for the first 5,000 hectares of tree planting, representing about $110 million of revenue over the lifespan of the contract. So we've taken a concept which is a bit like kind of junior mining and exploration work to develop these assets through to where they're operational, and then been able to finance this through pre-purchase agreements that cover all of the capex, all of the costs of developing that project through. So the ownership of these projects is established as part of the contract, and it's two different forms. One is we get ownership through a concession from the government, whether that's the state government or the national government, and they grant us the rights to use the area in a long-term concession. Or as we're doing in Sierra Leone, we sign 30 to 50-year leasehold agreements with the underlying landowners. We pay them for the lease, and then we give them a share of the revenue from the project. So it gives us a lot of control and ownership over the underlying assets, and also makes us a bit different from some of the other companies in this space. Probably the best example of how our community partners benefit from our projects is in Sierra Leone. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. It's classified as a least developed country. Most people in rural areas are living off less than $1 a day of subsistence income, and have very few other opportunities to make money, but they do have the rights to the land around them. So the smallholder rights are in the constitution, and they're our partners from a couple of different perspectives. Firstly, we lease the land for them on at least 30-year leases, and we pay them an annual fee per hectare for those land leases. Secondly, we provide huge amounts of local employment. So we could have up to 2,000 people each planting season working to both harvest seeds for for seedlings, but also out in the field clearing the scrub and planting. So huge amounts of economic benefit flowing to rural communities that are, some of the poorest places in the world. And that's really key, both to removing the drivers of deforestation, but also for our clients to know that climate finance is going towards making some of the world's biggest problems in terms of sort of structural poverty to help alleviate some of those problems. I think the biggest near-term catalysts that we can speak to are the completion of the planting work in Sierra Leone, where we'll have completed 1,000 hectares of planting, so close to 700,000 trees planted out in the field. We have a site visit where the Fortune 100 company that's our first large customer is visiting the site in October and touring around and meeting the tribal chiefs and the national government and continuing to fund and support the disbursements of funds into that project. I think this is really a catalyst for us in the country to become not just a sort of a regional carbon project, but actually a partner to the national government. And we believe we can take the 60,000 hectares roughly that we have now and expand that to maybe 150 to 200,000 hectares. The other big announcement we made this week is in Suriname. We have an agreement with the President's office in Suriname. We had a groundbreaking ceremony in Suriname, and that's a very low-lying country on the coast of Latin America. It's very vulnerable to flood risk. They've degraded the mangroves there. So in restoring the mangroves in that country, we both sequester 500 or 600 tons per hectare in the mangrove sediments, but also create a much more viable and effective barrier against sea level rise, which would otherwise flood these coastal communities. So, all in all, a really rounded ESG story from our perspective. We consider the impacts to be really significant, but we're also showing that you can do that and generate 20 to 25% IRRs from these projects. So it isn't just a feel-good thing. We're not a charity. We're not a not-for-profit. We're an impact-focused and highly profitable company that's going to be one of the largest players, we believe, in this $30 billion market.